And we're back. So, important part of this section is to be able to know your algebra and know it well. So here we go. We're going to have to do a little bit of review. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the evens, and then for homework, you're going to do the odds. So here we go. 12 problems. So we have 167 minus 7x plus 3. Since the minus is in front of the parentheses, we could write this as 167 plus a negative 1 times 7x plus 3. That makes it a little bit easier to see, because when we distribute, it'll be as such. So we get 167 plus negative 1 times 7x, which is negative 7x, negative 1 times 3, which is negative 3. And there we go. We get 167 minus 3, 164 minus 7x equals 108. And if I add 7x to both sides, I get 164 equals 108 plus 7x. Then I subtract 108. I get 7x equals 156. Cool. So now I need to find what x is. And after that, it's pretty easy. So number 4. We have everything divided by 2. So what do I do from here? What I would do is I would multiply both sides by 2. And when we're multiplying both sides by 2, that gets rid of the denominator. So what you do when you have fractions is you multiply by the greatest denominator. In this case, it's 2. So those cancel out. On the left, we get 2 times 2x, 2 times negative 7. So that's 4x minus 14 equals 8x minus 47. You could write it as plus negative 1, 3x minus 14. If you can't see it, sometimes that does help. So 4x minus 14 equals 8x minus 47. Remember, this is multiplication, so you can't just add the negative 47 and negative 1. Plus negative 3x positive 14. There we go. So 4x minus 14 equals, combine like terms, 8x and negative 3x is going to be 5x. Negative 47 plus 14 is going to be negative 33. We can make this smaller. Oh, not the whole thing. Whee! There we go. So I get, subtract 4x, add 33, I get x equals negative 14 plus 33 is going to be, let's see, so that's 14, so we subtract 14, that's going to be 19. 19 plus 14, 29, yeah, there we go. So there is x. You can always plug it back in and check if you are not sure. So let's go to number 6. This is going to be a little bit different. This is multiplying binomials. We did this a bit, but a lot of you seem to have forgotten, so I think this is a good time to review. So how do we do FOIL? FOIL is the same thing as distribution. I don't really like calling it FOIL, but it works. We multiply the first term by the first, and we get 3x squared. Then we do the first times the next, and we get 18x. Change colors. And then we do negative 5 times the first. That's minus 5x. Negative 5 times the last. That gives me minus 30. And then we just combine like terms. We get 3x squared, 18x minus 5x, 13x, and then minus 30. And there we go. That is called multiplying binomials. They call it the FOIL method only for multiplying 2 binomials, but I just like to call it distribution, because that's what it is. So here we go, number 8. Same thing. Doink. Doink. That's going to be 4x squared minus 2x, and then change colors. Doink. Doink. Plus 2x minus 1. So we get 4x squared. These cancel out, minus 1. And if you can see this in the future, we call this conjugates of each other. So if we have the same number and the same constant in front, same number on the ends, and it's plus or minus, it'll always end up giving you the squaring the first, so that's going to give us 4x squared, and squaring the last, that gives us 1, and then there's going to be a minus in between. If this is plus and minus, and the first terms are the same, so 2x and 2x, and 1 and 1. That is something you may notice in the future. And number 10 is going to actually have a property as well. I think I showed you before. So this is the same thing as 4x plus 3 times 4x plus 3. So we could do it the long way. Multiply both. That gives me 16x squared plus 12x. And then we do this guy. That gives me 12x plus 9. You see how these are the same? You see how this is that squared and this is that squared? So this is what we're going to be our shortcut later. So we get 16x squared plus 24x plus 9. So the shortcut is we square the first, we square the last, and then we multiply these together and multiply by 2. So we get 12x times 2. So that gives us 16x squared plus 24x plus 9. Same thing. Just a shortcut. All right. Now we're going the opposite direction. You might remember this. We are trying to break this up into multiplication so we can solve for x later. You probably have used these when you're finding zeros using the quadratic equation or something like that. So this is how you do it. If we don't have a number here, a lot of times it's quite easy. So we're looking for x and x. So x times x is going to give us x squared. And then we need, since it's minus here, we know it's going to be plus or minus. And then these terms, I'll call them a and b. A times b, it's got to equal this. Negative 36. And also, a plus b is got to equal positive 16. So a lot of people use guess and check, and sometimes I do too. So we look for, okay, so it's got to be 16 apart. So let's try it. So we got 36 and 1. One's got to be negative. So, all right. Nope, that doesn't add to. What about, this is positive, that's negative. No, what about 18 and 2? Yes, that's going to work. So this has got to be positive and that's got to be negative because we're looking for a positive 16, which means we're going to have x plus 18, x minus 2. So that is going to be our answer. And we can always check. First one I'm going to show you by checking. So we multiply. So we get so we get x plus 18 times x minus 2. Remember how we do this? X squared minus 2x. And then we do this guy plus 18x minus 36. So we get x squared plus 16x minus 36. We did it! Woo! All right, so that is nice. Number 14 now. So we need, oh boy. We have our x, we have our x, we have our plus, we have our minus. Since this is minus, it's got to be 2 that multiply to give us negative 247. So let's just not put the plus or minus so I don't confuse you. So we have our x because that's going to give us x squared. If we don't have a number here, that's how we do it. So 2 numbers that multiply to give us negative 247 and add to give us negative 6. Oh my God, good luck. You have to play around with this, but it's ending up going to be negative 19 and positive 13. You have to maybe play with this in your calculator a little bit. So they multiply to give you negative 247, and negative 19 plus 13 gives us negative 6. So that's it. So we get x minus 19 and x plus 13. Boom. All right, number 16. This is a trick. So since there is a 0 in the middle, we know, I don't know how to say this, but this is going to be something you probably have learned but forgotten. It's called difference of squares. If we have a minus in between, and we can take the square root of both sides, we can do a little trick. So what we are going to do here is just that. Take the square root of 9x squared. Square root of 9 is 3. Square root of x squared is x. We put that on both sides. And then we take the square root of 1, which is 1, and 1. And then we have plus or minus. And that will give us our answer. That is cool. So if I did that by checking our answer, let's see. Remember I said, before or earlier, if we have the same number here, the same number here, and we had plus and minus, that would give us what I talked about, the middle canceling out. So let's try this. That gives us 9x squared minus 3x. And then we get this guy, plus 3x minus 1. Cancel, cancel. 9x squared minus 1. We did it. Okay, 18 gets a little bit trickier, so here we go. 18, if we have a number in front of x squared, what I would do is first see, can I factor anything out of this? So could I divide this whole thing by 2? Like, for example, factoring out is the opposite of distribution. Ooh. So say, for example, I had 2x squared minus 2x minus 28. I could factor out a 2 and have x squared, because 2x squared divided by 2 is x squared, minus x minus 14. So that's the first thing you should do, if you can, but you can't in this case. We can't factor anything out here. So what I do is, this is the rule if you have a number in front of here. It's a trick. You might do it a different way, but this is the way I do it. I take out the 2 and I multiply it here. So that gives me 56, and then I carry it for later. So this is important. You gotta remember to carry it for later. So we multiply the 2 times 28. That gives us negative 56. And now we do it just as we normally would. First thing you gotta do is factor it if you can in the beginning by factoring a number out like I talked about, or it won't work. So let's see. So now I have x, 2 numbers that give me negative 56, and add to negative 1. That's what negative x is, negative 1x, so negative 1. So they got to be right next to each other for us to get negative 1, so it must be 8 and 7. Since we want it to be a negative 1, we want the negative 8 to be, we want the 8 to be negative, not the 7. So we get x minus 8, x plus 7. So we're not done now. So now is where the 2 comes in. So we bring back our 2, and we divide it by 2 and simplify it as much as we can. So 8 halves becomes 4. So we get rid of our 8 halves, and that becomes 4. Can we simplify 7 halves anymore? No. So then we carry the 2 over. So that becomes x minus 4 times 2x plus 7, and that is your answer. If you can't simplify it anymore, you bring the number that you're dividing by to the front. This one we could. So remember, this one we could. It was 8, and then we had our 2, but we can simplify this to 4, 1. So the 1 comes over, but the 1x doesn't change anything. So that's why we get x minus 4, 2x plus 7. Okay, So now quadratic equations is where we are setting it equal to 0 and then solving for this. So we want it in factored form for a reason. I'm going to show you why. Because you want it to be multiplication. That's important. So we get our x squared plus 6x minus 135 equal to 0. Because we're trying to find where y equals 0. Or where this quadratic function crosses the x-axis. So here we go. We're looking for two numbers that multiply to give us negative 135 and add to give us 6. We know it's going to be x. We know it's going to be x. So what I found it to be is no, that's not it. Oh, it's going to be 15 and 9. Except which one's going to be the negative? Because there's 6 away, one's going to be the negative, this is going to be positive, this is going to be negative because we have a positive 6 here. So we have 15 and minus 9 equals 0. Now this is nice. Now we can solve for each x since we're equaling 0. Since we're multiplying here, what if I divided both sides by one of these? So x plus 15. So x plus 15 times x plus 15, they cancel out. And we get x minus 9 equals 0. And then we solve. Because 0 divided by x plus 15, the 0 is like a black hole. 0 divided by anything is just 0. So goodbye. So x minus 9 equals 0. We get x equals 9. That's one solution. And then we go back. What if we divided both sides by x minus 9? Since it's multiplication, we can cancel these out. And if we do it by both sides, the 0 absorbs the x minus 9. So we get x plus 15 equals 0. Which means x not only is going to equal 9, but x is going to equal negative 15. And there are our two solutions. That's pretty cool. So that's why the factored form was so important. That's why this was so important. Okay, so we can actually divide that out. 24 and 22, same idea. So what if I had x squared minus 12x plus 36 equals 0? Factor it. We're looking for two numbers that multiply to give us 36 and add to give us negative 12. And what are they going to be? 6 and 6. So 6 and 6. And since we have a negative 12, it's going to be both negative. So we're going to get x minus 6 squared. What you would write initially is x minus 6 times x minus 6 equals 0. And you notice, oh, that's x minus 6 squared. Nice. So that's actually easier. So now we can say, okay, let's take the square root of both sides. Square root of 0 is 0. So we get x minus 6 equals 0. So x is going to equal 6. Because when you take the square root of something squared, you get itself, x minus 6. So a good algebra review here. Last one, and obviously going to be the hardest. So we get 2x squared minus 3x minus 9 equals 0. Now, can we factor anything out of this? No. So I'm going to multiply the 2 by 9 and save it for later. So I get x squared minus 3x minus 18 equals 0. 2 saving for later. So now I'm looking for two numbers that give me negative 18 and add to negative 3. So they got to be 3 apart. So maybe 6 and 3. Yeah, 6 and 3. Which one's going to be negative? Since we want a negative 3 here, it's got to be the negative 6. So I get x minus 6, x plus 3. So I bring the 2 down now. Let's change colors. And I divide by 2. Divide by 2. X minus 3 then. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. We can't bring the 3 halves to simplify it anymore, so I bring the 2 to the front. There we go. So we solve for each. So a shortcut is you just take each of these, since we're in multiplied form, and like I showed you before in number 20, we can divide each side by each of those and solve for each. But our shortcut is just to set each of them equal to 0. So let's do it. X minus 3 equals 0. 2x plus 3 equals 0. So our solutions are 3. And this is going to be 2x equals negative 3. So x equals negative 3 halves. So negative 3 halves and x equals 3. Those are our solutions. All right.